All right, before the break today, we were putting together this character for a skeletal animation. So just like we saw the other day, we drew each part individually, brought them in, put in the bones for the skeleton, then a remote transform to assign to the graphics. So the bone is the parent of the remote transform, and which is the parent of the graphics. So this is like a string that connects them together. So whenever we move one of the bones, um, think of this like a tether. It's a string connecting the transform data from the bones back to one of the parts of the graphics. So, like if we go to the head and choose the rotate tool, when we rotate the head bone, those graphics just kind of come with it. Hit undo on that. Or the right arm, if we rotate that, the forearm or front lower arm, which is a child of that, and the hand's a child of the forearm of the lower arm, those all rotate together. Lower arm, we can rotate that separate from our upper arm, and each one of our bones is set connected to the graphics. But that's what we saw on Monday, moving each one individually. That can be very, very time consuming. So what we're going to look at today is something called inverse kinematics. We talked about this at the beginning of the day, but um, there's some big terminology used for it. But basically, inverse kinematics are the way marionette puppets work, where there's a bunch of loosely connected parts into like a human shape, and then there'd be 4 or 5 strings going up, and the puppeteer is above the stage moving those strings, giving them either gentle tugs or release tightening or loosening them very gently, and that moves a particular thing. So uh, that's the way I like to think about it. So we need the part that's basically going to be where this string attaches to our skeleton. So I'm going to minimize this, and we need to control each of our limbs. We'll just use 4 targets is what we'll call them. We'll put in some targets that those things need to follow. But when I'm doing this, I like to think about those little puppets, and the target is kind of the string that attaches to a particular thing. So like one for the wrist, right wrist, one for the left wrist, one for each of the ankles. And then as we move those parts, the rest of the body is just going to follow along, or the rest of that chain. So like we'll put a target down by the hand, and as we move that target, this parent relationship up here, the upper arm and the lower arm, are just going to follow along with it. So to do that, we'll come up to the character and add in 4 just node 2Ds. We just need some spots. We don't need graphics or anything with them. Add in another one. Reselecting the root every time so that it doesn't form a parent-child relationship with the previous one inserted. And then I'll just give these some useful names. So this will be the right arm target. And that's kind of what our bones are going to follow. And our left arm target. Our right leg target. And our left leg target. And we'll just do the arms and legs, and the head is set up ready to move. So I'll leave it to you to add a target up here for the head to follow, and then make it so it can do little head nods. From the orientation of the character, a very small amount of scaling might make it look like the character's turning his head. But that might be a little bit tricky. So just maybe a couple head nods or something. See if you can get that one worked out afterwards. So there's our targets, and we'll just set our skeleton so that those key points follow our targets. First off, let's move him roughly into position. So with the move tool on the right arm target, I'll drag this down here and put it right around where the wrist is, or right around the center of the hand. So might be a good starting point. And really, we could stop looking at the skeleton here. I'm going to turn that off, and we can turn it back on if we need to see it, but uh, skeletons go inside of the skin, so we can turn the visibility off on that for now. The left arm target, I'll move that right down here, right about to the left hand. Right leg, come down here by the right foot, somewhere right around where the right foot is, and left leg target come down the same way, right, somewhere right around the center of the foot. So now to set these, we'll go to the skeleton 2D, and notice in the inspector panel up near the top, it's kind of covered, but there's a modification stack. So for those who have looked into data structures, studied those in another class, we set up these modifications as a stack. We can put a whole lot of them together. So first thing we want to do is create a new skeleton modification stack 2D. Basically the only option on things we have to create here. We'll create that, and when we expand it, it's not enabled right now. We'll get to that in a moment. You'll see that we can expand this modifications, and we have an add element button here. So let's add in our modifications. Or first off, let's look at the modifications we have. So we hit add element, and you see it says empty, so we'll need to add a new one. This first one, skeleton modification 2D, that's kind of the parent object of all the others. That just gives us a blank starting point, and we would do everything entirely in the script with that one. So look at, we put a target like somewhere off in the distance, and generally what we would do is we would set a look at thing, and it's always going to turn, the skeleton is always going to turn to face whatever it's looking at. So if this was like an opponent, we could set a look at target, and then we would make a reference to that target in the script for our player object, and it just follows the player's transform, and then the opponent will always be looking at our character, for example. CCD, inverse kinematics, the IK at the end stands for inverse kinematics. So that's sort of a chain way. That's one of the methods of doing it. Same with this. This is another common way of doing it. There are multiple ways to do it. Jiggle is kind of nice. So jiggle is like the one we'll do where we move just a couple bones at a time, and it moves towards the target, bends at the joints we set up and everything. But jiggle is a little less precise and goes past it, and there are different ones we can have in there, but a good example of that is if we have the character's hair. We want it to flow independently, and hair's going to wiggle around and not be super stiff. So it'll roughly follow the target, but with a little bit of wiggle room and go past it and wave around and things like that. The next one here is the one we're going to use, two bone inverse kinematics. You'll notice the start of the name is all the same. So skeleton modification 2D, all of that. Two bone IK, so inverse kinematics. So this is the one we'll want to use. A stack holder has sort of a collection of, it's just a container to put several of them together. We can mix and match these. And physics bones is when we want our physics engine to have an impact on it. So for example, if something in the game came along and hit the character's arm here, we would probably expect some sort of response, like something hitting the arm is going to knock it over. So that's how we get those. For us today, let's just use the two bone inverse kinematics. And once we get that added in, if you click on it again, you'll see all the options for it. So you'll notice there's 3 spots that need assigned: joint 1, joint 2, and the target. And you'll also notice this flip bend. So it's kind of set up so that it's going to try to predict which way to bend, and can only bend that way, right? Like our elbow doesn't bend backwards unless something really bad happens. And our elbows and knees bend in opposite directions. So the way this is set up, our arms will need that checkbox on, and our legs will need that checkbox unchecked. So that's just which direction it bends. So I'll go ahead and click that to work on the right arm. So for the first joint, I'm going to come in here and go to one of the bones in this chain that makes up the right arm. So I'll go to the right sleeve. Let's try this. And then for joint 2, one of the other bones that makes up the right arm. So I'll go with the lower right arm. And then assign it to follow that right arm target. Oops. And then we have to click Enabled. Notice it kind of straightened out. It's trying to follow that spot where it's at. So if we go to that spot and hit Move, we get these more natural movements, right? The elbows bending in different directions, kind of straightening out. We can just from one point of control, and you'll notice very subtle movements, so be careful with them. But we get a lot more of the natural movement in the arm, just the way an arm would naturally move. And probably just like the puppets, it takes a little bit of practice getting used to slow, subtle movements, and practice around with those. But once it seems to be moving correctly and you have a good spot where it's getting good control, come back to the skeleton and overwrite the rest pose. So now this is the starting point for that right arm one. So let's do the same thing for the left arm. I'll go ahead and click again here again to collapse that and add another modification. Once again, the two bone inverse kinematics. And we'll click on it. We'll have the same options. It's an arm. So we need it to bend this way instead of like our knees that bend this way. So joint 1, something in the left arm chain. I think we did left upper arm on the first one. And for joint 2, we'll assign the lower left arm. Our target will be the left arm target. Okay, it did something weird there. Where's the left arm target at? Okay, the left arm target's way back at the origin. I'm going to go to the skeleton and turn off the enabled, and then move that left arm target down here where we're like kind of pointing more towards it. Then come back to the skeleton. So make sure you disable it if you need to move that target. So it's enabled. And now if I go to that target and move it around, we get those nice little controls. I'm going to set it somewhere, go to the skeleton, and overwrite the rest pose. And notice where our right arm target is versus where our left arm target is. I'm going to click here, disable that modification again, and move the right arm target down there where that would be. Let's see if this does something weird. No. Reset to rest pose. I'll undo that movement. There we go. Get back to right like it was. Sometimes it works in ways that we wouldn't really expect. So I was getting really good control with it right on the hand on the left arm, but not on the right arm. So watch out for things like that. Slow, subtle movements. That's the big thing. Right? We can grab that right arm target, and as we move it around, we're getting lots of good control over that arm and can get all of our keyframes that way. Same thing with the left arm. We can hold it straight, bend up and punch, and it'll kind of follow natural movements. It'll take you a little bit of practice to get used to it. And after you do one, get everything set back in the right place. Make sure you overwrite the rest pose. Next up, we need to do our legs. So let's collapse this, get that out of the way. and add another element. And it's going to kind of follow suit. The one difference I've already mentioned, so a two-bone IK, and then all that other stuff. Since our arms needed that checkbox for which direction it bends on, uh, we want the knees to have that off. Then we'll assign, let's say, the right leg. The upper right leg is our first joint. The lower right leg is our second joint. And then we will assign the target to be the right leg target. Oh, probably should have moved that into place first. So just like the last one, I'm going to go in and disable that and grab that right leg target and move it down here by the shoe where we would, it seems like a logical place to kind of make that connection. And while I'm at it, I'll go ahead and move the left leg target down to the spot it needs to be eventually anyway. So select back to the skeleton, enable it. Looks like we got a little bit of movement. So if we grab the right leg target, notice that now the knee's bending in the right direction and we can rotate things around. Might want to make small adjustments to the graphics, move them into different positions, do a second draft of the graphics now that you can see how the overlap's going to happen, and just very slow, gentle movements. You don't want to do big movements, right? That's going to flip everything over all over the place. And it gives us a nice, a more natural way to get our inverse, to get our keyframes for the animation. So once that's working correctly, I'll come up to Skeleton 2D and overwrite rest pose again. That way we have that good starting point we can always get back to. And finally, the left leg. So let's collapse this and get that out of the way. And add one more modifier. Again, a two-bone inverse kinematic. Expand that. It's a knees, so leave the box unchecked. Our first joint will be the upper left leg. Our second joint, joint 2, will be the lower left leg. And we'll assign the target as the left leg target. Looks like it moved a little there. So let's grab that left leg target. And once again, as we move that target around gently and slowly, we can get all these positions. So that is inverse kinematics. Get it back to a nice little starting position here. And go to the skeleton 2D and overwrite the rest pose. So now it'll always come back to this. And we just grab one of our targets. And as we start moving it around, we can find those keyframes. And then from then on out, it's just like we saw on Monday. We'll add an animation tree, or sorry, animation player, and we'll create our animations this way. New animation player. We set in keyframes for maybe the arm. We have to choose. Can we do it for the whole skeleton? No, we'll have to go through and kind of set the transforms, the keyframes, just like we saw, and then like we saw earlier today. Once we have all our animations set, then we go through and create an animation tree, probably a state transition tree, so that we have the finite states of which animation we're in at a given time. But the rest of it is like we saw Monday and first thing today before in the first part of the lecture before the break. But this takes a little bit more setup, but hopefully you see how we have this a lot more control over getting those keyframes set up and moving our stuff into the positions we want it in. Right? If we're going back to kick something or left leg target, a little bit more setup, but we it's worth it when we go to set up our animations. So something to start practicing with. See if you can set up the head. Remember, it's two bone inverse kinematics, so we need at least two bones in that same chain of parent-child relationships. So all of the indentation there, and see if you can set up a target to follow and get the head to nod a little, and get some practice with it. It's it definitely takes a lot of practice, but that's the steps, and hopefully that'll get you going, and you'll be able to make some really nice sprite animations this week. Um, and I guess that will be it for today. I will see everybody next Monday.